You will hear a number of different recordings. And you will have to answer questions on what you hear. There will be time for you to read the instructions and questions. And you will have a chance to check your work. All the recordings will be played once only. At the end of the test, you will be given 10 minutes to transfer your answers to an answer sheet.
Thomas, let's not go to the lab. Let's just stay here in the student lounge and drink tea and review the chapter.
You know we can't do that. We've a responsibility to turn up and make sure our tutor has understood the week's lectures. If we don't go, no one will ever even realise she's got the theories all muddled up.
Oh, really? Sophie, it's awful. Marlena just opens her mouth and I'm confused. Really,
Marlena's our tutor.
Yeah, I gathered that.
You lot have got no manners. I was in the middle of saying something. She'll say things that make no sense whatsoever, and I'm thinking I've misunderstood something, and I'm looking around the room, and everyone has these looks on their faces of
disbelief and merriment.
Maybe you do, Thomas, but we're not all geniuses. Really, I'll be so worried that I've got it all wrong. Then people start asking questions and by, we figure out that she's mixed something up.
That's too bad. It's not a good situation at all.
But surely you're exaggerating a bit, Lynn.
No, it's awful. I don't know how she got through her undergraduate studies, much less got accepted as a postgrad here. You'd think our professor would have some idea about her abilities.
Hi, Helen. How are you?
I'm actually pretty excited about the research I've been doing. I've found out heaps about Art Deco architecture in New Zealand. While all the major cities there have pockets of Art Deco, it seems that Napier, a small city on the east coast of the North Island, is considered one of the world's purest Art Deco enclaves. There are so many examples of the style still visible today.
Really? I've been concentrating on Bandung, which is in central Java in Indonesia. It is also a major Art Deco city. Unfortunately, it hasn't been preserved so well, and in the race to modernise, many marvellous buildings have gone under the wrecker's ball.
How do you think we should structure our essay? Should we write about New Zealand first or Indonesia?
Art Deco appeared in Bandung in the 1920s, but from what I've read, it didn't make it to Napier until much later. If we choose a chronological scheme, then Indonesia would go first, but I'm in favour of writing our essay using thematic similarities and differences.
That's a good idea. Let's identify what the two cities have in common. From what I've discovered, in both places, Art Deco architects combined a new European aesthetic with native elements.
Yes, they did.
In New Zealand, Maori motifs were used as decoration. The Maoris are the indigenous people who lived in New Zealand before it became a British colony. There's a sort of spiral symbol called a koru, and there are zigzags, like patterns from Maori weaving, both of which were incorporated into Art Deco buildings. There's a bank in the middle of the city and an old headquarters for a tobacco company, both with gorgeous carved stucco facades that utilise these motifs.
Indonesia was also a colony, a Dutch colony. I understand almost all of the architects in the Art Deco period were Dutch, And as you said, they were influenced by a new aesthetic in Europe, but they were also affected by native architectural styles. At ITB, the famous technical institute in Bandung, there are Art Deco roofs that imitate traditional Javanese mosque or temple roofs.
That's interesting. I know that the city of Napier was rebuilt in 1931 after a massive earthquake, and since people wanted the town to feel like an optimistic new place, they chose Art Deco for many of their buildings. But I've no idea why Bandung has so much of the style.
I was quite puzzled about the prevalence of Art Deco myself. After fossicking in the library in some old journals, I learnt that there was a plan that never eventuated to move the capital from Jakarta to Bandung, so lots of public buildings were commissioned around the same time, the early 1920s.
That's curious. I thought the majority of the famous Art Deco buildings in Bandung were large hotels or private houses.
I think the split is 50-50. Private and public. Certainly the campus of ITB was enlarged then. College education for the rich expanded in the 1920s, and the local tourist industry was taking off as well. You're right, we've got tourism to thank for the grand Art Deco hotels like the Savoy and the Pranger, built in the late 20s and early 30s. Photos of the foyer and ballroom of the Pranger are so romantic.
Well, good morning, everybody. My name's Elizabeth Reed, and I'm your Assistant Welfare Officer. What I'd like to do now is tell you a little more about some of the social facilities available on the campus, and also to tell you something about what the town has to offer. As you probably know already, the Student Union Building is the main centre of social life here, as indeed it is in most British universities. The Union runs a weekly programme of events for all tastes. Oh, everything from discos to talks by guest speakers. Many of these events are fundraising activities for charities, which the Union takes very seriously. They manage the Students' Union paper shop, selling magazines and newspapers, as well as stationery, sweets and so on. Let me see. There's the ticket shop, where you can get some very good deals on, well, for example, coaches to London, or inexpensive charter flights, as cheap as you'll get anywhere, people say, or tickets for big pop groups playing here or at other venues all over the country, or plays in London. Oh, and we mustn't forget the Union cafeteria and the big new diner. Yes, did you have a question?
Yeah, does the Union also provide help with any problems? I mean, advice on financial problems, for example. Or does the university provide that?
Yes, the Union run their own advice service, offering help with financial matters, such as grants. I'm sure you realise anything medical should be discussed with the University Medical Service, which also has an excellent counselling centre. I think that was made clear yesterday. However, the Union has its own officer who can give advice on legal problems.
You now have some time to look at questions 17. Now listen to the rest of the talk and answer questions 17 to 20.
Now, on to Radford. For a town of its size, Radford has some unusually good leisure and community facilities, and has quite a good shopping centre with an interesting range of shops. As you go into Radford, there's a new, well, quite new, Olympic-sized swimming pool. That's on the outskirts at a place called Renton. Above the pool, there's a high-tech fitness centre. Are there any ice skaters here? No? Oh, pity. The facilities for ice skating are excellent. Well, the new Metro Tower, right in the centre of town, has got an ice rink and a sports hall for squash, badminton, volleyball and several other indoor sports. And in the same building, there's a new cinema with 6 screens. Then, let me see, in the main square, just 2 minutes' walk from the Metro Tower, there's the Theatre Royal, which often gets London productions on tour. And in the streets nearby, you can find a good range of inexpensive restaurants, including Indian, Chinese, Thai and Italian.
That is the end of section 2. You will now have half a minute to check your answers.
English called Kathy and Graham, planning a display on 19th century British life and literature for a university event. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 24. Now listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 24.
OK, Graham, so let's check we both know what we're supposed to be doing.
OK.
So, for the university's open day, we have to plan a display on British life and literature in the mid-19th century.
That's right. But we'll have some people to help us find the materials and set it up, remember? For the moment, we just need to plan it.
Good. So, have you gathered who's expected to come and see the display? Is it for the people studying English or students from other departments? I'm not clear about it.
Nor me. That was how it used to be, but it didn't attract many people, so this year it's going to be part of an open day to raise the university's profile. It'll be publicised in the city to encourage people to come and find out something of what goes on here. And it's included in the information that's sent to people who are considering applying to study here next year.
Presumably some current students and lecturers will come?
I would imagine so. But we've been told to concentrate on the other categories of people.
Right. We don't have to cover the whole range of 19th century literature, do we?
No, it's entirely up to us. I suggest just using Charles Dickens.
That's a good idea. Most people have heard of him and have probably read some of his novels or seen films based on them. So that's a good lead-in to life in his time.
Exactly. And his novels show the awful conditions that most people had to live in, don't they? He wanted to shock people into doing something about it.
Did he do any campaigning other than writing?
Yes, he campaigned for education and other social reforms and gave talks. But I'm inclined to ignore that and focus on the novels.
Yes, I agree.
Before you hear the rest of the discussion, you have some time to look at questions 25 to 30. Now listen and answer questions 25 to 30.
OK, so now shall we think about a topic linked to each novel?
Yes, I've printed out a list of Dickens's novels in the order they were published, in the hope you'd agree to focus on him.
You're lucky I did agree. Let's have a look. OK, the first was The Pickwick Papers, published in 1836. It was very successful when it came out, wasn't it? And was adapted for the theatre straight away.
There's an interesting point, though, that there's a character who keeps falling asleep, and that medical condition was named after the book, Pickwickian syndrome.
Oh, so why don't we use that as the topic and include some quotations from the novel?
Right. Next is Oliver Twist.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot in the novel about poverty, but maybe something less obvious.
Well, Oliver is taught how to steal, isn't he? We could use that to illustrate the fact that very few children went to school, particularly not poor children, so they learnt in other ways.
Good idea. What's next?
Maybe Nicholas Nickleby? Actually, he taught in a really cruel school, didn't he?
That's right. But there's also the company of touring actors that Nicholas joins. We could do something on theatres and other amusements of the time. We don't want only the bad things, do we?
OK.
What about Martin Chuzzlewit? He goes to the USA, doesn't he?
Yes. And Dickens himself had been there a year before and drew on his experience there in the novel.
I wonder, though. The main theme is selfishness. So we could do something on social justice? No, too general. Let's keep to your idea. I think it would work well.
He wrote Bleak House next. That's my favourite of his novels.
Yes, mine too.
Oh.
His satire of the legal system is pretty powerful.
That's true. But think about Esther, the heroine. As a child, she lives with someone she doesn't know is her aunt, who treats her very badly. Then she's very happy living with her guardian, and he puts her in charge of the household. And at the end, she gets married, and her guardian gives her and her husband a house, where, of course, they're very happy.
Yes, I like that.
What shall we take next? Little Dorrit? Old Mr. Dorrit has been in a debtor's prison for years.
So was Dickens's father, wasn't he?
That's right.
What about focusing on the part when Mr. Dorrit inherits a fortune and he starts pretending he's always been rich?
Good idea.
OK. So next we need to think about what materials we want to illustrate each issue. That's going to be quite hard.
That is the end of part 3.
It's lucky it's so big. A smaller or even medium-sized company would have gone under by now.
Ah, well, in fact, what I want you two to do is to go away when we've finished our discussion today and write a report. We've looked in general at the telecommunications market in the UK over the last few sessions, and I want you to take Box Telecom as an example and suggest some ways in which they might overcome their problems, and outline the reasons why you think as you do. But try and keep it intrinsic to the company rather than dragging in other examples. Is that okay, Karen?
Yes, I think I can do that. Personally, I've got great hopes for it. I think it will recover. That advertising campaign they did was very strong, and they're very innovative with their products. They set new trends. The company's got to recover, don't you think, Jason?
I'm not sure. I think it can, but it's not a foregone conclusion unless they manage to attract the right level of investment. The company definitely needs a boost, and to attract more highly skilled workers if their recovery is to be long-lasting. When I was talking to the marketing manager, he said to me that he thinks the company had got a great management team. But he would say that, wouldn't he? But they are suffering from having to work with outdated production machinery, and that could cost a lot to put right.
Well, personally, I think the stock market is to blame. I think they were expecting too much of the company, and then inevitably it looked bad when it didn't perform. The market should have had more realistic expectations. And I disagree with you about the advertising campaign, Karen. That's where they could do with some innovation to get sales kick-started. Anyway, let's see what you come up with those.
Some of you may be interested to know that the library is offering specialised training sessions on writing a dissertation. Obviously, this is not relevant to those of you who are undergraduates. It is just for postgraduates. Your department will discuss the planning stage of the dissertation, i.e. what you're going to do with you, and we will focus on the structure of it. However, the training will also include some time on the computers. I realise most of you know how to organise files, but we can show you the different ways to run data programs. Your tutors will tell you at the outset how to set out the chapters they require, but you will need to ask them how they would like you to organise the bibliography, because it varies depending on your subject area. When you've got something together, the trainer here will look through the draft version for you to see if it's okay. And one final point, for those of you who have registered from abroad, we can offer individual sessions on dissertations if you feel you need them. If you require language lessons, then they are available from the International Centre next to the Law Department.